Yo, 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 welcome to Made to Think with your host, Ninjam. Now, I'm going to start doing little professional introductions at the beginning before I start the actual interview, just to make the show more presentable. And this is my first guest that I didn't send the questions to in advance. He answered every question on the spot. We covered a ton of content, which he features on his Old World Florida YouTube channel if you want to research more. He did a fantastic job in answering some massive questions in such a short space of time. So as I said, if you want to research more, do what I do, go and check out these people's content. They spend tons of time on them, and you do need to do a little bit deeper than just listening to a 2-hour interview. Now, what we're going to cover in this, if this is the kind of content that you like, you're going to enjoy this show. First of all, we're going to talk about the Bock Saga. We're going to get into Tartaria. We're going to talk about the Seminoles, the Moors, pyramids maybe in America, star forts, the Saxer Saga, the Saxer Stones, and evidence of Atlantis being in Florida, which is apparently the real Garden of Eden. We'll touch on the Phoenicians, how they link to the Finnish, the Elfins, a little bit of Tolkien there, why the monarchy likes to wear purple, the real Gulf of Mexico, who are the Creeks, a little bit about the mystery of Coral Castle, some Shakespeare, Francis Bacon, Plato, who really controls the world, cannibalism, shape-shifting, and a little finish with a gator story and how possibly, you know, gators rule the world. Who knows? It's all in there. It's packed jammed. It's the one and only Dr. Narco Longo. I appreciate all the support, everybody. And now enjoy the show. I'll see you later. Having it large.
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
As though we are all the same, as though we share the same taste. I think a quick perusal of my video collection will tell you many of us walk to the beat of our own drummer.
Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Yo, 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 welcome to Made to Think with your host, Ninjam. I have such a tremendous guest today. As you know, I'm always looking for inspiration. I'm always looking for the people that make me think. And this guy certainly has made me think a lot over the last year or so. I've been following his amazing YouTube channel, which just keeps getting better and better. Production is next level. Content is completely out there. I came across this wonderful gentleman on the Sam Tripoli show, and I was just absolutely blown away. And I've been trying to get hold of him ever since. This is the one and only Mr. Dr. Narco Longo. Get ready for an absolute banger. How are you, sir? Welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself.
Sorry, muted again. But glad to be here, Ninjam. Thanks for having me. That's
Very
a
welcome.
flattering introduction, and happy to be here.
Amazing. Now, please just introduce yourself for those that don't know you.
So it's Dr. Narco Longo with the Florida Department of Magic. Director head director of the Florida Department of Magic, and I run the Old World Florida YouTube channel, and I work at Florida's #1 metaphysical book and crystal store, the Dancing Elephant. And yeah, Old World Florida, lots of old Florida history, esoteric, hidden history, secrets, conspiracy theories, everything supernatural, esoteric Florida. Yeah, that's really it.
That's amazing.
Holistic health, a lot of holistic health too.
Yeah, I've been watching all your videos. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up in Florida?
Yeah, I've told that quite a bit. It does bore me a little bit repeating it. You know, I hate to be a pain with that, but I have lived in Florida my whole life.
Yeah.
And went to school here. My father was a Florida State Seminole, which ended up having probably some influence on my, you know, all my research later, or would have some deeper connection later. He also studied Tolkien language.
Wow.
And Lord of the Rings lore. And he minored in that. So he majored in criminology, and then the rest was Tolkien stuff. So Finnish, Elven, you know, all that ancient Greek. And so that would end up, I guess, not directly, but indirectly, it would show up later in my research. And I grew up hunting, grew up fishing, pretty normal Florida boy. It's more on the wild side, more on the extreme side. Kind of like the extreme sports and played lacrosse and football growing up.
What triggered your curiosity to start questioning everything?
I saw a UFO when I was about 14 or 15, either my 8th grade or freshman year of high school. And that definitely helped me commit to this. Like, I didn't need to be convinced on any conspiracy theory after then. But you know, it's hard to say. I've just always been, I guess, bored by a lot of other stuff, and I guess my truth meter goes off and I get interested by this deeper esoteric truth. What's behind the curtain has always kind of interested me in every area. And
yeah, me too. How close were you to this UFO? Was it far away in the sky or something?
Yeah, that was I would say somewhere in between a planet, like the brightest planet in the sky.
Wow.
And then like a street light above you. So somewhere in between there, and then zipping unbelievable distances in the sky. It wasn't a bug under a light, you know, it wasn't something getting lit up like a bat or something. It was 100% a luminescent thing.
Yeah.
Craft, alien, I don't know, but
I've definitely had the same experience. Something zipped across the sky, but then it zipped straight past in the opposite way. Now, what's the deal with this bookstore? And how important is reading extensively? And would you say it's a dying art for the new generation?
yeah, you know, I guess I've got a contrarian take on that, like a lot of things. But I work at this bookstore, run it with my brother, Dancing Elephant. People ask all the time, have you read all these books? And, you know, no, nowhere close. But my brother's read a lot more of them than me. But I'm much more of a quality over quantity guy.
Yeah.
So I don't really read for pleasure. I read for, you know, to extract the nutrients. And not much of a fiction guy, not much of a literary works guy. I love Plato, Shakespeare, the Bible. That's usually what I'm reading.
Okay.
And,
what's the most expensive book you've ever sold in the shop?
oh man, well we've got some like special editions of Secret Teachings of All Ages, like some
Wow.
nice big, it has a case and introductory, like big booklet that's as big as the book itself. And we've got, a couple of those, and those sell for like, I think we sold one for like $600, and my brother's probably sold maybe some stuff a little more expensive than that, but it's hard to say, accumulative orders, like accumulative checkouts that there's been some impressive ones, over 1,000 to 2,000.
Now,
Crazy.
From your experience, what's been the most difficult book to find or track down for somebody, like a request?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know about other people, but I'll tell you what's the hardest stuff for us to get is what's this guy's name? Dugan. Are you familiar with
No, Dugan.
I'm blanking on his first name, but they nickname him he's been nicknamed Putin's Rasputin.
Wow.
Got a ring to it. Putin's Rasputin. And he is like the advisor, spiritual, philosophical advisor, historical advisor to Putin.
Interesting.
He's a leader of like nationalistic, thought. I've got to plug my computer in real quick. One second. Excuse me.
Sorry.
We closed, the bookstore closed at 9. So forgive me. Always a little bit unprepared.
That's my dream.
Streams.
Working in the bookstore is my dream, man. You living it. Look at all them books. So this guy you're talking about, is he the one still working for Putin? Because I heard that Putin had some kind of magician by his side who sort of like shows him which direction to go and then points the crowd in the opposite direction, like an illusionist, like a.
Yeah. So I think his name's Alexander. His last name's Dugan for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So
okay.
if you search it up quick, I'm sure you can find it. But
so why is his books difficult to get?
Well, they're nationalistic. They're pro-Russian. They explore Aryan topics. They explore World War II, and they just view history in a less. I'm all America. I love America. Fucking best country there's ever been. Not even close. Sorry, dude. But Russia has some interesting takes that got overlooked, and he's doing them justice, and he's doing the whole world justice and Germanic and Slavic peoples justice by talking about their ancient religious practices and why the West is being kind of cold in the direction that it is right now. But his books are super hard to get. Another one is Harun Yahya.
Wow.
Who I'm also blanking on his actual name. Harun Yahya is his pen name, I think. And then he's, I think, like a Turkish mystic. So Dugan is a mystic. I call him a mystic, right? He's not so much like a practicing ceremonial magician or anything. He's a mystic, which means today all mystic means is you have no bibliography.
Right.
Like you're capable of generating answers. That's all mystic means to me today is, you don't need a bibliography. You are the source, right?
Okay, great. Now, what would be your top 5 book recommendations of all time? I know you love Plato.
Yeah, it's a good one. Complete works of Plato.
Yeah.
Cannot go wrong with that. If you're speaking English, you're living a Western lifestyle. Best know why. Best know what it means to be a Republican.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people saying Democrat, Republican. Oh, it means the same thing. Oh, you don't know that conspiracy theory yet. You haven't attained that level of conspiracy. I remember my first vote, right? Like people look down on voting and look down on political parties as it's such snobbery. People, it's like conspiracy theory snobbery, saying both sides are the same. Well, yeah. Hey, let's look at the Baphomet statue for a sec. Yeah. He's got a right hand and a left hand, but guess what? One's pointing up and one's pointing down.
Yeah.
And I can promise you, elephant is elephant. It is elevating.
Yeah.
Donkey is the down key, downtrodden, low key. That's Saturn. That's Moloch. That's the ass or the donkey or the mule. Mule is Mulek. That's straight out of the Old Testament too. That's also Saturn. So ass, Mulek, and donkey, the down key.
Yeah.
Right, downgraded. And you know what certain tribes in like around the world do with donkeys? You don't even want to know. So this is a very Saturnian animal, and it's literally like a emblem of bestiality. And liberal means libertine.
Yeah.
To be like a Libra, like the serpent, seventh sign of the zodiac, evil. Adam's the first half of the zodiac, evil. Eve is the second half of the zodiac, starting with Libra. It's the fall of man, fall of the earth, the fallen angels, right? So all of that, blah, blah, blah. Conservative and liberal, Cancer, Libra. They're not the same. They're not two halves of the same coin. One is up and one is down. We've got to at least take a lesson out of the Baphomet. So, all that is basically tying back to Plato, because Plato wrote the Republic. And the Republic is what inspired, republicanism. And I've got a new video out about elephants. People should go check out.
Yeah, it's really good. Awesome, man.
So all about the elephant symbolism, and talks about the Cancer and Libra element, the astrology, astrotheology behind it. But republicanism is something that everyone can get behind. And democracy is really not something to be glorified much at all. And you've got to really see why the Democrats have always been. The blame almost always lays with them, like even way back to the, KKK and stuff. These were Democrats.
Right.
The Democrats wanted to take over South America and Cuba. So democracy is where everyone gets one vote. They love that because they love what's the word? Pandering to the downtrodden, right?
Okay.
Whereas republicanism is all about uplifting the downtrodden and commanding a higher standard. Right. Blah, blah, blah. So whatever. The Republic, that's in the collected works of Plato. So it's important because it gets to the root of politics. And Plato explains how we have a duty, especially as a man. If you're a woman, whatever. Especially as a man, to be engaged in the political sphere as well. So any of this truth or conspiracy snobbery where they're like, politics, I signed out of there a long time ago. I'm off grid, man. These people, they're ultimately burying their head in their sand, and they're just voting for their imaginary friend. Like these people don't know how to make concessions, don't know how to negotiate, don't know how to get things done, because ultimately you don't get what you want 1,000,000%. You might get what you want 100% through concession, deal making. So politics is all about balancing and decision making.
So
Plato addresses that.
You got Plato, and then a couple of other books.
Yeah, you'll have to reel me in a little bit.
It's fine. Don't worry. I know how to keep you on.
Right.
I like when you go off. It's great. But you mentioned Plato. Who else would you recommend for the? Anybody want to go down this kind of?
Right. And really, I heard this from Terence McKenna the first time, long time ago when I was 18 or 19. He goes, if you speak English, you ought to be reading the complete works of Plato, complete works of William Shakespeare, and the King James Version Bible. So I got the first two of those. I ordered them right away. King James Version, I'd usually read online. Got myself my first King James Version Bible like a year ago or so. But we'd read it in school. We were very familiar with the Bible in school. I went to an Episcopal school, kindergarten through 8th grade. So
Yeah.
pretty familiar with the Bible. So those three right there, Plato, Shakespeare, King James Version, and guess what? They're actually all the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the King James Version is largely just Neoplatonic philosophy getting woven into
Yeah.
Semitic history. And then the King James Version Bible was probably written by the same group of geniuses behind Shakespeare and Shakespeare's plays. And a whole lot of conspiracies, Francis Bacon, Edward de Vere, John Dee's in the mix, of course. And the true identity, it could have been a whole bunch of people. I talk about that sometimes on my channel, but regardless, that was the same crew.
Yeah.
Whether it was the final draft or the Kabbalistic coding, throughout, it was the same crew behind the King James Version and the complete works of William Shakespeare.
What do you think the aim is with that? What was the aim with the new edition of the Bible?
Well, it was very political. And this is kind of the essence of Protestantism, is people wanted the Bible in their own language. The everyday man, the lowest of the low, should be able to have the Bible in their own language. There is nothing sacred about Latin. There's nothing tying Latin to what's being said in the New Testament. English has as much Greek in it as Latin does, believe it or not. Especially when you start looking at runes and Phoenician and Etruscan, you start noticing the alphabet comes from the north down to the Mediterranean, not the other way around.
Yeah.
So basically, whatever. I forgot what I was talking about.
It's okay. What do you think would be the most important thing that we could discover if we got access to the Vatican?
That's a good one. Well, you asked me for 5 books. I would throw in there 7 Pillars of Wisdom is a favorite. This isn't necessarily my reading list for everyone, but I love 7 Pillars of Wisdom. And then the 5th slot would be a wild card, either True Messiah about Apollonius of Tyana.
Wow.
Or a good astrological book like General Principles of Astrology by Aleister Crowley.
Oh wow.
Or A Cosmic Science, which is another astrology book, or A Wiser's Guide to Practical Astrology, which is a little small book. She's a Florida author.
I've got to check a couple of them out.
so sorry, you were asking about the Vatican. If there was anything I could find in the Vatican, in their vaults, you mean, the hidden treasure? Well, I would probably want the treasure trove of everything they have on Florida, because the Spanish were Catholic. So all their records in Florida, that's got to be a treasure trove. That would be like a wet dream. And then everything they got on Finland, because the Finnish got murked by the Catholics, but they were the last to fold to Christianity.
Great. We're going to get to that in a second. Now, you started a YouTube channel just over 2 years ago, which nearly has 5 million total views and nearly 60,000 subscribers. That's incredible achievement. Congratulations. What was the inspiration for this? And did you think it would become so popular so fast?
Hell fucking yeah. Don't put your pants on if you ain't going on outside.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. No, seriously, it's a great channel. It's so informative. It's so unique. I love it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate the support, for real. But I've always been into this stuff. I've always been into YouTube, conspiracy theories. I've always been into Florida history a little bit. It's definitely not what I wanted to be when I grew up, like a Florida historian.
Yeah.
but I always knew I'd be into conspiracy theories. And I play music, so I guess my dream was to be like a, rock guitarist,
Mm.
but I still get to do that. I still make a lot of the soundtracks behind the videos, which is very fulfilling.
Oh, great. I
And
always wondered about that. Yeah, cool.
not always, it's like 50-50 usually.
You've
But
got some very eccentric little selections in your video, like some tunes I've never heard. So that's you. That's great, man. Really
not
cool.
always. Yeah, so
Uh,
sometimes it's sourced elsewhere.
Right.
But
Right.
um so I got into, forgive me. What was I talking
Just
about?
say, what was the inspiration for you to set up the YouTube channel?
Right, right. So I was watching a lot of YouTube conspiracy theories, astrological stuff, and I was going through Florida, and the real impetus for me just making the YouTube channel and deciding to put out videos was I was going lived in my van for a long time, still do pretty much, and was traveling around all across the Southeast United States. Been to like 44 states, seen all different architecture in all the different places, and seen a lot of different cool sites. But before I even had the YouTube channel, I went through St. Augustine a couple times. And man,
Yeah.
St. Augustine is, for America, it's where the story really starts, you could say.
Yeah,
And
just give me a sec. But I was going to say your first real YouTube video was about St. Augustine. So why did you choose to cover this place for the first video? That was my question next.
right, yeah, good observation. I really don't even remember the order on that, but I know a couple of my first two videos were like troll, like meme videos where it was
Yeah,
Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro binaural
that's
beats, like two different speeches,
yeah,
one coming through each ear. Just
yeah.
stupid joke. But and then yeah, St. Augustine, I was walking around with my girlfriend at the time and saw all these buildings there, and it really just didn't fit in. Some of the buildings there really do look like they could be 1,000, 2,000 years old, and the city itself is nicknamed Ancient City.
Wow.
So it's really not ridiculous to start asking these questions, and I would rest, rest, rest a lot of, I bet a lot of money that some of those buildings are a lot older than they would say. And people think of the American Revolution as like the birth of the United States. But once you start reading American history, looking at Florida and understanding how so much stuff was happening there before, you really start to see that the Declaration of Independence and war with England, that was really more like the puberty, and the birth was really in Florida. That's almost irrefutable. Is the Spanish were active in Florida decades before the English, and that's why St. Augustine's so important. So there's remarkable architecture there. There's some serious antiquitech going on. There's some serious antiquitech going on. Fucking people knocking on the door were clearly closed. But there's a whole lot of good architecture. There's a whole lot of antiquitech, as people say. So, all this Tartaria stuff was exploding over YouTube, and I was pretty into that. Of course, I've always been critical of some of the biggest names in the scene because they're totally just shills, doomer shills. But
So was it the Tartaria videos that led you there, or you'd already been there and then started getting into
no, yeah,
Tartaria? Yeah.
yeah, it kind of coincided, and I
It-
was just going through St. Augustine, sleeping downtown, decided to walk around in the morning, saw a star fort. I
Yeah.
always knew that the star fort was there because way back before Tartaria days, there was this channel called New Earth.
Yeah.
She was on the star fort thing like a good 10 years before all the Tartarian pages started popping off, and basically went through St. Augustine, made sure to see that star fort, and then started piecing together a lot of the other history. And then, of course, just once you start scraping the surface in Florida, it's like giant Native Americans. You know, you really have to dig deep in other states to see that stuff. But in Florida, it's the first place in the United States Europeans landed. The first people they met were giants.
That's
right,
incredible.
7 feet tall or taller.
Is St. Augustine known to all Americans as the oldest city in America? Do you actually learn anything about that at school?
Great question. Yeah, that's probably confusing for a lot of my international viewers. Well, yes. Well, it's a great question, but I guess the answer is no.
Wow.
In Florida, you get a pretty good dose of early Florida history and the Spanish conquistadors. But I know that in high school, when I went to a public school, we were not talking about that stuff, and definitely no St. Augustine. So most people do not know that. I can't speak for elementary school in other states, but I do know that just day to day, talking with people from out of state, most Americans are not aware of St. Augustine's importance or its early date.
Now, when I was a kid, I grew up in England, and we would go on field trips to like York, or all the old castles, or we'd go to like these museums where you could be like a Saxon for a day and make shit out of straw. We were very much into that, but surprisingly, you being in Florida, why the hell wouldn't they take kids there on a field trip and show you? It makes no sense at all. It's a beautiful piece of architecture.
Right. They took us to Miami. They took us to Palm Beach, and we saw a cool mansion and the big old tree here. So they took us to some cool stuff, but yeah, not the most historic area. And they did take us to Washington, D.C. So they were capable of it,
Very interesting. Now, after you did that video, you just came out with an absolute banger that shifted my perspective, and that's not easy. You posted the Hell on Earth video, which absolutely blew my mind. How did you come across the Bock Saga, which I went out and bought it and read it, and I've been passing it around in Vietnam now. Amazing book. I think it just resonates with me very well. But how did you come across that?
Yeah, I'm probably a little reluctant to say, but Robert Sepper channel was probably the first time I ever heard about it. I know Santos Bonacci has name dropped Jim Chesner a couple times, but I never heard of Eeyore Bock until Robert Sepper of Atlantean Gardens, the guy out in California. He's okay. He's got some great videos, and he's got a lot of garbage beliefs, that go with it, but that's whatever. And people probably just think that about me, so whatever. And he did a Bock Saga video. It was very different from his other videos, and I think he got pulled down. I think it's not there anymore. I don't know if he's got any more Eeyore Bock ones. I don't keep up with his channel enough. But
you say it got pulled down by YouTube? Censored, you mean?
I don't know. I could be wrong. It might still be up there, but Eeyore Bock, if you look that up, an old Robert Sepper video, I just haven't seen it in a long time. And any of the times I search Eeyore Bock, I don't see Robert Sepper's name come up anymore.
Right.
But I could be remembering it wrong. But Eeyore Bock on the Robert Sepper channel, I think it was only part of the video. And it was a conversation with Jim Chesner. So Jim Chesner is the first person that I kind of clung on to online and started listening about the Bock Saga. And Eeyore's videos were even what was it, 3 years ago or 2 years ago? I got into the Bock Saga before I started my YouTube channel, but 2 or 3 years ago, even, it was harder to find stuff. There was only one channel that you could find a lot, Suckin' Sun. So Suckin' Sun had some great videos with Jim Chesner. like documentary style. They went to India, they went to Finland.
Yeah. I
And
watched it. I watched all that. Jim passed away, right? Bless him.
right, yeah, I think he passed away during COVID,
Oh, shit.
RIP. And then I think Leo Newgren passed away as well. Those are the two gentlemen that are featured most in my Hell on Earth video. And I've also got to give credit to, Suckin' Son is who filmed all that original content. He filmed all that the interviews out in Finland, but it was really they're great videos, but it was like documentary style. There wasn't much edited on top. And I don't mean this in any patronizing way or anything, but it was lacking maybe some old world astrological context.
Right.
That could have been, really paint a better picture and make it less about some family in Finland and more about syncretism. All
Right.
the religions coming from the same northern origin, and just fleshing out the fertility worship stuff to make it more palatable for people, and also fleshing out the racial origins. That's super deep, super, people love that stuff. Of every race, people love to hear the racial origins, and it's really a great perspective on it that exalts all and gives a fair due to all the races. Without it explains why some do better in some areas, some do better in some other areas, and climate had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. How
And
would you
geography.
summarize the Bock saga just quickly without getting too much
Yeah.
into it for newbies?
So the Bock Saga is an oral history, you could say a legend, a mythology. It's a story
Yeah.
that was shared according to the family, according to your Bock, was contained within his family for thousands, if not millions of years.
Wow.
And it pertains to the Garden of Eden, pertains to Atlantis, how they relate. And it talks about the Ice Age, talks about the origin, explains the origin of the white race, blue-eyed,
Yeah.
blonde-haired, light-haired, fair-haired people, explains the origins of all the other races too, explains golden age circumstances, like how man fell out of a tropical, easy, borderline animal like existence, and
Yeah.
then descended into a more, you could say, chaotic or even refined, but technologically complicated existence from then on. And writing things down, it explains how writing things down
Yeah, you got the
altered human history forever. It explains fertility worship. It explains why there's a lot of quote unquote disgusting stuff etched on the walls of ancient temples, and why were ancient mystics and these people obsessed with sexuality. And like I said, things that might be disgusting today were pretty vital back then. And even if we're not trying to convince anyone of anything, but it explains why. It gives much of a better answer than just fertility worship. Because with that kind of term, it just kind of stops there, and you're just like, oh, well, these people were into some bizarre stuff. The Bock Saga gives, in my eyes, the best explanation there is. And it explains the best thing the Bock Saga explains: the origin of English, the origin of Germanic languages, the runes, and then also how society went from white magic, which would be, PG-13 warning. White magic revolves around sexual fluid and the creation of life and the preserving of life and the beautifying of life, the refining and improving of life. Whereas blood magic is black magic. Black magic is blood magic. They're
Yeah.
synonymous. No blood, it's not black magic. Might be evil, but it's not black magic. Blood is black magic. Black magic is blood magic. And it explains how the world was run by righteous, holy, a white brotherhood, a white nobility that practiced white tantra, you could say. And then there's kind of today, and maybe the last 6,000 years, it seems to be the consensus, there's been a black tantra, a loss of life system, a debt-based, karmic-based sacrifice system that's been ruling the world for the last 6,000 years, and maybe a lot longer than that, but good prevails in this world, rest assured. Maybe not right now. I think it does right now. I think people just complain a lot. We live in a great world. We live in a great world today. All conspiracy theories aside, we live in a blessed, comfortable existence.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned your father studied Tolkien, and then how that links into the Finnish. Tolkien kind of got a lot of his influence from the Finnish language, and that became the ruins became the angles of light, which became Anglo-Saxon, right? The English language came from there, and also this connects into the capital of Finland was Helsinki, is now Helsinki. It used to be paradise, and hell is where we get the Hellfins, the Elvins, which also links into Tolkien, and that brings us later then to the Phoenicians. Right, we'll get to that. You really opened my mind on that. Now, what I'm doing is I'm going through my questions in order of your videos, like a chronological history now. So then you got into Tartaria. How does that relate to America and the rest of the world? Still, there's a lot of people that don't know about Tartaria, and it's also we should claim that a lot of people think it's a psyop, sending people down rabbit holes. But what do you think?
Well, to your last point, it largely is. I don't know if psyops, the perfect word for it, but it's definitely throwing a lot of people off of the real scent, right? There's a big nihilism trash can with the word Tartaria painted on it that a lot of people are just diving into head first today. So recently I just took part in a documentary about all this stuff. You could say it's right. Yeah, Old World Order. So you could say it's like the Tartaria documentary, but the word Tartaria is barely used because Tartaria is like a catch-all umbrella term, right? Atlantis is largely guilty of the same thing. Right. So when people get triggered by Tartaria saying, oh, well, why is that word being used to describe all this stuff? Sure, it's a misnomer. It's being used all over the place where it never really belonged, but Atlantis is used in the same way. So I'm all about looking for the real, tangible, literal Atlantis, but you've also got to accept that Atlantis has become a catch-all term for any lost ancient civilization that kind of escaped the history books. So anything sunken, right, also is kind of likened to Atlantis. So Tartaria, I'll tell you what my practical definition of Tartaria is. It pertains to everything between Atlantis times and like the Industrial Revolution. So like muskets, clock making, piping, plumbing, a lot of things that we might think is like Industrial Revolution may have been here a heck of a lot longer than we think.
Yeah. And
also, the word Tartaria applies to a portion of Russia and kind of an ethnic group, you could say. And there's the Tartars, the Tirtovs, this is all the same area out there in Russia. And that word has kind of been getting thrown around because there's all these theories about this grand empire of Tartary. Now that's largely true too. There was a great empire of Tartary. there was a Tartarian, a golden horde. There was a lot of these things. To me, the conspiracy theory comes from, but here, there's people like John Levi and people like that who would say, anytime there's a great stone architecture building, that's Tartarian. Or that's, all this one civilization that got all killed off at the same time, and we're just some rats that found the ruins, scurrying throughout the ruins, just waiting around for the next reset. That's the Tartaria that I distance myself from.
Right.
I would say that to me, Tartaria is like a catch-all for kind of the steampunk industrial age revolution that may have been here a lot longer than we think. It's also a catch-all for anyone coming across the Bering Strait before Columbus and after the Bering Strait, commonly accepted Bering Strait narrative with the peopling of the Americas. So any Asiatic people that would have been more advanced than a hunter-gatherer coming across the Bering Strait, or even sailing across from China into the Americas, would also, to me, fall under this acceptable Tartarian umbrella term. And that's kind of the way I look at it, because I've seen some great documents about, we've all seen the CIA documents about the Tartarian Empire is to be removed from the history books, and there's stuff like that. That's real. So it's getting used all over the place. There's people saying, "Oh, the Tartarians, they never used the bathroom, and they could snap their fingers and make the pancakes appear on, their dinner table, and they had free energy, and they had no problems, and nothing ever went wrong." And then some bad people, I don't know, Rome or the Jews or whatever, came over and just screwed the whole thing up. I'm not really on that wavelength.
Okay.
I know a little bit of too much about it, like world history, to just a lot of these Tartarian people consider themselves experts because it's the easiest expert in the world to be. All you have to do is say, "Oh, that story, fake, made up. Oh, that story, I don't really want to read it or check if it's real or fake."
What do
that's
you
fake.
think of,
That's fake. And
what do you think about the guy who was on the Old World Order, the guy from My Lunch Break? Do you think he presents quite well?
I'll be honest, I'm really not familiar with him at all. Sean Hibbler was very excited that he was going to be part of the project, and I looked him up and maybe watched enough of his videos just to say, well, yeah, I'm happy to work alongside that guy. Nothing too ridiculous.
What
but
he does,
I'll be honest, I didn't know who he was until the premiere. And like a couple days after the premiere, we were watching the video, and I was asking my audience, like, which one's My Lunch Break?
I saw you.
He's introduced. It doesn't say My Lunch Break. It just said his actual name. I was introduced as Dr. Narco Longo. So
I saw
it didn't say My Lunch Break on there, so I didn't know which one he is. So if he's watching this, I'm sorry about that, buddy. But
he was wearing a hoodie later.
I didn't know his real name. So I'm sorry, I didn't know his real name already, and he was wearing like a lot of stuff, like
now, interesting
glasses and hoodie.
His videos, he brings up like the wiki history of these buildings, and these giant buildings apparently made in 1 year, which that I found super interesting. Now, who are the Seminoles? Because I'd never heard of these guys until you brought them up. But can you give us a quick brief on the Seminoles? Why are they so important to the story?
Sure. So just a couple of points too. Tartarian, I've seen good documents about, all the Asiatic people crossing the Americas have at certain times, even by the Smithsonian themselves, been termed Tartarians because they came from a region of Tartary, squinty-eyed Asiatic people. They existed in Tartaria, to the real Tartaria in Eurasia. But then also you mentioned, things being built in 1 year. Yeah, that's always a great question mark that that can never really be satisfied by the naysayers is, well, how do you build this in 1 year? Especially when you don't have concrete, you don't have concrete roads to build, let's say you have the machinery or the manpower or the supplies you need, you're still hauling it through dirt or over horse and buggy. Now, horse and buggy people are capable of a heck of a lot, and I'm not taking anything away from our ancestors, especially our European ancestors. They built badass shit, sky high, and it was glorious. But the real conspiracy theory is we've forgotten so much. That people stopped caring. I'm always 50-50. Yes, there's an Illuminati that's corrupting everything and hiding as much as they can, but at the same time, it's always 50% consensual. We're agreeing, we're not doing our part. And so that's the 1 year thing. There's a heck of a lot of buildings in St. Augustine that have that same 1 year story, and it's like, no way. So forgive me. And then also you were the last point of your question.
I said then, how does the Seminoles come into this story?
Thank you. Yeah. So the Seminoles are a people, a Native American Indian people who are native to Florida. They would say North Florida, parts of Georgia, and maybe even parts of Alabama. And, it's hard to say because they also are largely identified with the Muskogee, and it really got messy later on with the terminology that some people will tell you Seminoles also like an umbrella term, like a catch-all for any of the tribes that made it past the 1700s that were still alive, who weren't Cherokee, who weren't Creek, and who weren't Choctaw, and who weren't all these other tribes. Anyone that was bottled down and kind of dripped it down into Florida, the remnants of the Calusa, the remnants of the Tequesta, remnants of the Timucua, all those would have been contributed. And we know that there was some Calusa in the Seminoles, but they're a tribe of Indians who are a Florida tribe, and they're some of the most active and populous and wealthy. And I say active like in business, like they're very entrepreneurial. They're very with the times. Like they're down in Miami, they have a very state-of-the-art like clubhouse, and they own these the Hard Rock Casino is the Seminole Hard Rock down here, the Guitar Hotel down here in Hollywood, Florida, pretty much Miami. And the Seminoles are the Seminole Wars were fought between the subsequent president of the United States, Andrew Jackson. And that's kind of how Jacksonville got its name too, is Andrew Jackson was tasked with fighting Seminoles. And the Seminoles were one of the 5 civilized tribes. And they were, meaning that they adopted firearms quicker than a lot of the other people. They adopted a lot of the trade methods and smithing and all the trinkets and accessories. They were very industrious, and they got with the program. Right when the Europeans showed up, they were very with the times. So the Seminoles used firearms. They went barefoot. These were very tall people, very, very tall. They average about 6'4", even to this day. And probably the farther back you go, the taller they were. But they were big boned people. The reports about them, people who measured their bodies and stuff, they were remarkable physical specimens. And that is also showed in the fact that, 300 or so of them, a couple thousand, but ultimately 300 warriors were able to fend off an army of tens of thousands.
Wow.
By evading them, surprise ambushes, and small amounts of treachery on their part, but large amounts of treachery on the Americans' part when they captured the leader the wartime leader of the Seminoles. The people say chief, but he wasn't really a chief, but it was Osceola. Osceola was captured by the American army and some of their agents that were working for them, and in tricking these natives, they basically drew them out into a truce, a white flag, what's the word? Not a treaty, but they stopped fighting for a second to negotiate.
Surrender.
Well, they didn't surrender. They
I-
weren't done fighting, but they went out on a white flag truce.
Okay. Truce.
To go and discuss terms, but they were ready to keep fighting too. Well, under this white flag, which is a universally respected wartime tradition, you see someone with a white flag, you let them approach. And they did let them approach, they met out with them, and then they kidnapped them, stuck a gun to their head and went, but they violated the white flag truce and caught Osceola, imprisoned him. He was imprisoned in a star fort, believe it or not.
Wow.
And
So you think the Star Forts were originally like a prison or like some kind of place where, like a castle? I don't know.
yeah, more of a castle.
But they're
They're definitely death machines. I think that's something people miss out on, is people who are convinced on saying that they weren't military installations are missing out on the fact that the best killers are healers, and the best healers are killers.
Wow.
And a fort like that is, yes, it's designed for maximum death to protect the people on the inside, but it's also designed to heal the people on the inside. And that's the way I look at these star forts is, yes, they're military installations, but they are also medical installations.
Right.
And they tie in with the water and perhaps some underground hydro grid. That might sound ridiculous, but go check them out. Enough of them have freshwater cisterns, internal cisterns.
Yeah.
That don't make much sense because as soon as they get hit with a cannonball, they're no good. So these were integral to a lot of star forts, the freshwater cisterns.
When you talk about healing, there's a very interesting guy, got a YouTube channel called Land of Chem, Jeffrey Drum. I don't know if you've seen his work, but he's breaking down the function of all of the tombs and pyramids in Egypt in a physical and scientific chemistry-based way. It's called Land of Chem. And he talks about how water and stones and crystals, they can create ultrasound for healing. And when you go in, I've been to Egypt, when you go in some temples, you can feel it still resonating with you. So you're absolutely right. These temples used to be used for healing as well. But now that kind of technology could be used on the flip side to hurt people. Now, what you mentioned the chief before, wasn't it the guy from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that you pointed out as him being Seminole? He's really big.
Yeah, that's a good one. He's Muskogee. So there's kind of a blurry line between Muskogee and Seminole, but the Seminole are pretty much, they speak a Muskogee language. And then there's also the Miccosukee language. And the Seminole and Miccosukee, that's kind of synonymous. They're culturally the same, but politically different. And so we have the Seminole and the Miccosukee down here. And the Seminole, man, they are very tall, like you said. And that actor was a Muskogee gentleman from, I don't remember, might have been Georgia, but he's definitely Muskogee. And yeah, 6'7", that gentleman. And I have plenty of pictures of 6'4", 6'6" Seminoles. Excuse me.
And a lot of these giant bones that have been found in the US, the Smithsonian have took them away, so there's not so much evidence really now.
Yeah, that's a fact. There's a lot of shills out here who are saying that the Smithsonian never threw away anything. That's a lie. We've got tons of proof.
Yeah.
Not evidence, proof that bones were shipped from Florida of extra large human bones shipped from Florida to the Smithsonian, and then they were lost. I have 5 instances of that I can point to you just in Florida alone, where it's documented. And a couple of those, the Smithsonian even, of course, has to address it and says, well, we're sorry, they were lost in transit. Right. So the Vero man is one of the most significant findings ever in the Americas. It proved that man was living alongside Pleistocene animals, which largely debunked or undermined the Bering Strait narrative, because it said humans were here about 14,000 years ago, if not more, which was over the 13,000 Bering Strait window. And so the Vero man was sent to the Smithsonian, and they lost it. And there's written proof of that. And then there's other giant bones that they found that were sent to the Smithsonian. So I've got 3 articles, newspaper articles, with other receipts from the Smithsonian themselves that prove, yes, very large bones were sent to the Smithsonian and they were lost, quote unquote. So is there a grand conspiracy? Probably, but we'd have to say allegedly, because maybe they were just losing all these bones. Maybe they've got them in a vault underneath the Smithsonian. But I'll tell you, the first curator of anthropology for the Smithsonian was Allais Hardlicka. He liked, whatever, licking hard ones. I don't know. But Allais Hardlicka was, I think that's like a Czech name, or something Eastern European, Hungarian, Czech. He was the first curator of anthropology for the Smithsonian. And he was like the #1 attack dog that they let loose. He was the #1 shill agent, psyop artist who was going in and erasing, debunking all the giant claims around the United States. He was the #1 debunker. But guess what? This is, I love reading this. It's so satisfying, validating, because even the #1 henchmen that they sent to get rid of giant bones and disprove them, and this was the guy who would go and debate and critique all these findings and say, well, we, the Smithsonian, the very, highest arbiters of truth, we didn't measure that. So send it to us and we'll measure it. No, it looks like you were wrong. You didn't know how to measure the bones. And we lost them on the way. And he was the guy, he was the face of that for much of this. And in, I think, 1922 or 25, sometime around there, he wrote a book called Anthropology of Florida, because much of his career, maybe even most of his career, was spent going over the findings from Florida, because Florida has some of the most, if not the most, mounds in America. It's probably a tie between Ohio and Florida for the most earthworks. Yeah. Oh, Ohio's got a lot. Florida's got a lot. But
let me just point out that I love what you did with the golf courses. You're saying that these old golf courses are sacred sites that could have been burial places for these Indians. Yeah, that's very interesting.
It's a fact. There's a place in Palm Beach over here where they have a little public park, which are very few and far between on Palm Beach Island, because it's so ritzy. They don't want public facilities or anything. They don't want people hanging out. But basically, there's a place over there where they've got a public little gazebo where you can hang out, and they've got plaques there talking about a little bit of Palm Beach history. Yeah. And one of them says, the earthworks, the mounds, the burial mounds, the shell middens were all incorporated on Palm Beach Island because no real estate got spared. All the earthworks on Palm Beach Island were incorporated into people's houses, parks, and yes,
Golf
golf
courses.
courses. So
Very interesting.
Donald Trump buried his wife on a golf course. But here, let me say about the
Yeah, you was talking about the mounds and the giant bones.
yes, the giant. So Alice Herdlicka,
Yeah,
basically, I hope I painted that picture good enough. He was anti-giant. He
yeah,
knew his job. His job was to disprove giants. There's no
yeah,
mistakes about that. And
yeah.
he had to relent, had to concede and accept, minimize, but still, in his Anthropology of Florida, admitted he has this whole thing. The title of this one little section is Massiveness. And I've got it saved on here somewhere. I've put it up on screen before, but in the Anthropology of Florida by Alice Herdlicka, he has a quote that says, the bones in Florida are not only larger and denser and stouter, but they are more heavily mineralized, probably due to a different diet, like all the spring water.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
all the shellfish. There's fruit all over the place too. Fruit is amazing for you. But this was like a next level degree of boniness.
Yeah.
And these people had such large bones. Not only were they long for like tall people, they were stout.
Yeah.
They were just different. And he was theorizing, and he had to acknowledge this in the Anthropology of Florida, because everyone at the time knew that there was giants being dug up all across the United States, and everybody knew that Florida had the most and often the tallest. And they were some of the first living people encountered by Europeans in the Age of Discovery. So
And your
there
new
were
video
giants.
about the elephants goes into the big woolly mammals, the bones being found. I thought that was really interesting. So what we're saying here basically is the Smithsonian have a very good technique of like hiding the real narrative and giving us a false one. Now, do you think are there pyramids in America from what you've seen?
Right. So America, if we're talking the Americas, there's a lot of stone pyramids, but I know you probably meant the United States.
Yeah. I've been to Guatemala. I love the connection you made with Maya and Wata. That was fucking brilliant. And
right.
So yeah, have you ever seen, because there's pyramids in China now that are coming out, and they've made a good way of hiding them with trees.
Right. So I tend to look at it as an Israelite thing. So shout out to Wayne May. It was the first time I ever came across this theory. Was in Exodus, you've got a clear command from the Lord God, right? Whoever it is doing the narrating here, but God tells the Israelites in Exodus around chapter 20, around there, 25, chapter 20, verse 25, or around there. God says, he tells the Israelites, when you're building religious buildings to me, when you're building an altar or a high place, you are not to use hewn stone, and you're not to use steps. So no steps and no hewn stone.
Cool.
Well, if you're interpreting, history like that with these laws of Moses, you're going to look at all these ancient world empires and kind of be able to tell who's an Israelite, who's following the law. And when you look at places with stone pyramids doing a hell of a lot of human sacrifice, you can pretty much rest assured they aren't real Israelites. The step pyramid is glorifying something other than the one true God. It's probably glorifying man and some lesser doctrine. And the step pyramid also was Mother Earth. This is kind of like a hippie pipe dream, but this is the essence of truth. Is when I think of an advanced civilization, a lot of people think about like this. Why are we living in an age of iPhones and people are still obsessed with advanced technology? Any rational monkey who evolved from monkey to human would be satisfied with this. I mean, we made it, man. We made it, right? Why is there this itch that people are trying to scratch with this ancient technology stuff? Everybody knows there was something more advanced, something less cluttered and less confusing than this, right? And ultimately, when I think of advanced, it has to be responsible. That's advancement. It has to be responsible, meaning these people are not going to litter. And littering is not just Kit Kat wrappers and Snicker wrappers and all this garbage no one picks up, which people need to pick up, stop littering. It's also confusing the future.
Yeah.
If we're carving, this ties into the Bock Saga. Everything was oral so that nothing could be confused.
Yeah.
And that sounds that might sound backwards today. We think when you write something, when you carve something in stone, it's set in stone.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If you set something in stone and then everyone who knew what was carved dies, you've lost the language, you've lost the interpretation. You're gonna have to Zechariah stitching your way through world history, there's people have tackled that question. People have tackled that problem. The Great Pyramids have no writing on them.
Yeah.
The Great Pyramids, nothing is said. The geometry is obvious.
Yeah.
So when people started writing and tallying and keeping track of all this stuff, you can really identify that with Sumeria and the creation of our official ancient human history. Civilization starts in the Fertile Crescent with Sumeria and Ur and Uruk and these things like that. And
that's the Epic of Gilgamesh, yeah.
exactly. That's not the origin of civilization. That's the origin of debt keeping. And probably the Tower of Babylon with the confusion of tongues was not so much the confusion of tongues as it was different languages then getting written down a hell of a lot of different ways. All of that just was confusing because the people that come later, they don't know what the hell's carved in this stone. They don't know why it was so important that it had to be carved in stone. And the more it comes across as language and not obvious, evident geometric truth, it's going to be confusing to people. So that's kind of the whole thing behind not building with stone, and number one, you don't need it. There's enough boulders and eroded stone that you can grind up and cast or cement together. And it's a fact to this day. I can prove this to you. In the Middle East, in the Fertile Crescent, the Levant, they identify Israelite sites by whether or not they have hewn stone. Right. So you can literally look out in the Middle East and say, this is an Israelite site because they cobbled it. They took a boulder here, a pebble here, a stone here, and they mortared it all together. So these people dealt with mortar a lot. That's very in line with the United States Native Americans. Native Americans in the United States had concrete, cement, tabby. They could build shell buildings, right? Enclosed buildings.
Yeah.
And that to me screams Israelite. So in the United States, to my knowledge, there's not any stone pyramids, but we have a heck of a lot, if not the most, pyramidal structures. There's platform mounds, table mounds, pyramid mounds in Florida that are on par with the pyramids in Egypt. Maybe not the Great Pyramid, but we have Monk's Mound. We have these big mounds in the eastern United States as well that are right on par with the Great Pyramids of Giza too. So you got big ones in Florida. They're pyramid shaped. You get up to the top of that, you feel like you're at the top of the pyramid. Some of these are remarkable, and they're all made with dirt. So if they're 4,000 years old, 8,000 years old, 100-foot tall pyramid mound made out of earth, I mean, do you really need stone? You know, it's still there, right? It's doing the job. So
Now, talking about that, I'm obsessed with ancient Egypt and how they built the pyramids. You've not yet done an episode on Coral Castle, which is in Florida. I'd love to see you do something
right.
on that. Have you been there
Good
yet?
point.
And how do you have you been there? What do you know? Because apparently that guy had some kind of technology where he could lift these stones alone. Nobody saw him build it. Do you know anything
Yeah.
about that?
That's a great point. That's a great point. It's got a little funny story behind it too. But
Go on.
Coral Castle, I love the Coral Castle. I love talking about it and learning about it, and it's something I visited years before I ever became Dr. Longo or made the YouTube channel. I had seen that with my friends. It was something we definitely made an effort to go visit right out of high school, and it was on my radar very early on in the conspiracy research. Maybe even before I was 18, I'd heard of it and had seen documentaries, like old gold star, like perfect heyday of YouTube, ancient conspiracy theory. Like, I'm sure you know, like, you know, my videos are okay,
Yeah,
but 10 years ago on YouTube, there was master classes of ancient technology and adrenochrome harvesting, like everything Pleiadians, light body, you know, like reptilians, everything was getting cymatics. Everything was very, and it was international is what I'm saying. Like, you know, I like to focus on Florida, but this was big picture. It proved God. And there was documentaries like Ancient Wisdom, just Ancient Wisdom, like part 1, part 2, part 3, you know. And then Forbidden Knowledge, not Billy Carson, not that clown. It was Forbidden Knowledge documentaries on YouTube. Again, I think they were like part 1, part 2, but it was like stitched scenes from like dramatic conspiracy theory movies, like
yeah.
You know, you can't handle the truth
I
and
remember.
stuff like that. So old glory day YouTube conspiracy theory videos.
You saw
The
a
Coral
video of
Castle.
Coral Castle,
Yeah.
yeah.
The Coral Castle was always in those. It was always took up a big chunk. So
Yeah.
to me, when I was getting into like Florida history, old esoteric history, trying to come up with, you know, videos like what I was going to start talking about, Coral Castle was always like covered, like charted territory for me. Like I'm definitely going to talk about it, but it was a thing that I'm very much, I want to be like a pioneer. I'm guilty of, I want to go where people haven't gone before.
Yeah.
I want to tell a story that hasn't been told. And not always, you know, I love telling traditional stories and doing established stories justice. But with the Florida research, I wanted to show people what hadn't been done justice. I think people have been doing the Coral Castle justice long before I ever hopped on YouTube. So there's really good stuff out there. I'm gonna address it soon. And then the funny little story would be my girlfriend's right here, but earmuffs.
That's okay.
I had I went down there to film a new video there. Went down to do a video at the Coral Castle.
Ah, okay.
And it was in between girlfriends. I was dating around a little bit, right? And went to the Coral Castle with this girl who lived in Miami.
Ah.
Girls from Miami are nothing but trouble. Okay. So Miami is where good girls go to forget morality and ethics and honor. So basically, stay away from Miami girls. And I went to Coral Castle with a fan who reached out when I was, like I said, in between girlfriends. So was thinking about dating this girl, and we went to the Coral Castle together. I took a bunch of pictures, a bunch of, secret footage, like had to like sneak it in because like you're not supposed to film video there. But I was like, but it was actually, it's actually recording, like my
Right.
iPhone, like pretending to snap photos, but it's like just recording the whole time. It's just messing around. But I went there, filmed all this stuff, did a whole thing, and then it just ended like ugly with this girl was, I'm not gonna spill any, air out any dirty laundry, but it didn't end like great. And she was in like half the pictures, and just the whole day was
I see.
kind of
Okay.
so I've just been like Coral Castle on the back burner. We'll, have to go back down there and start fresh. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So
That'd be
start
brilliant.
fresh. Start fresh on that one. That's the funny little stories.
But do you know anything
Stay
about
away
this?
from them. Stay away from the Miami hoes.
Can you say anything about this so-called device that he had? It was apparently a part of it was on display there. How do you think he lifted them stones?
So I do think there's something deeper behind it.
Yeah.
Something beyond just hoisting them on a tripod. He had a tripod. We're told that he was lifting stones. From what I've read, from what I've heard, again, I wasn't there, I didn't help him build it. From what I've read, that he was hoisting stones with this like a pulley.
Pulley, yeah.
He had this assisted thing that he could
Yeah.
pull stones up on a tripod. It
Yeah.
was very kind of slapped together, but they have an idea of what those pieces could lift, and it was about half the weight of the biggest stone he's got over there.
Yeah.
So again, also the tallest stone that he had there would not fit
Yeah.
standing upward beneath the tripod. That's another thing that is kind of like a thorn in the side of the naysayers, is that there's videos of people who say, I've done it. There's multiple people on YouTube who say, I've done it. I know exactly how he did it. It wasn't aliens. It wasn't cymatic. He wasn't didgeridoing them with his frequency device. Like, he wasn't doing his Reiki lifting or anything. They say he was just pulleying these limestone, and limestone's, granted, it's easy to work with. You can saw, if you have the right type of steel, you can saw right through it with a saw.
It just seems like a lot of work for one man, though.
Exactly. He was a very small guy. The fact that he was driven to do all this is a conspiracy theory in itself.
Yeah.
I can tell you that he encoded lots and lots of course, Masonic knowledge into it. Education. You can learn things about Masonry by taking a walk around. That's something we've got to always remember when seeing these sacred sites and ancient sites, or new focal points for some of these like belief systems. And what I mean is Freemasonry takes pilgrimages to the Coral Castle. It's a very common pilgrimage for Masons to take. Masons will often get together in groups and go travel down to Florida together for the sole purpose of seeing the Coral Castle. Yes, that's a fact. And CC, I should say, CC is Coral Castle 33. CC is the third letter, so 33.
Yeah.
The zip code of Florida in South Florida is 33.
Yep.
So it's all 33445 or 33000, or so it's 33, and then Florida's birthday is March 3rd.
Wow. 33rd degree Masonry, and Jesus's birthday, 33, died at 33. Yeah. Now, here's a little question for you. I'm sure you know it, but which tribe was responsible for carrying the Ark of the Covenant?
Which tribe
Yeah,
of Israelites
yeah. The
in the
Levites,
Old Testament? The
the
Levites,
Lev,
yeah.
the
Right,
Levites,
the
and
priestly
apparently
caste.
you're into etymology. The Levites, where we get levitation. So I'm not sure, but
Ooh.
I do believe that yeah,
Ah,
you can magnetize
yeah.
the crystal, the quartz inside granite. These all these things you can create levitation. So yeah, find that interesting.
That's a good one. I gotta thank you, Ninjam. That's a good one. I've never
Mate,
thought of
I'm
that
gonna
one or heard
start
it.
firing it up. Now, we just talked about the pyramids. Now, let's get into the Saxer Saga a little bit. And this one, really epic stuff that you did. Thought was one of your best videos. How does the Saxer Saga, the Saxer Stones, show some evidence of Atlantis being in Florida? Which I am with you on it. I think it's a great theory.
Right. So, Atlantis is another one of those catch-all umbrella terms that maybe this isn't fitting everyone's definition of Atlantis, and that's okay. But to me, this fits my definition of Atlantis. When I think of Atlantis, everyone's talking about this lost city or this sunken city. I always think about, show me the Navy. I want to see the fleet of Atlantis. This
Yeah,
is what there's ancient cities all over the world, empires that have been forgotten about. What made this different was the maritime power. That's what's remembered about these people. Also, they had elephants. So, I want to see the remnants of this fleet of Atlantis. I would expect that from a place claiming to be Atlantis. And I would also expect to see elephants, like we spoke about. My recent video talks about the elephants of Atlantis. But the Saxer Stones, named after John Saxer, he's an archaeologist, a Swiss, he's an inventor, a bike mechanic is a job that he's been doing a lot, in his recent years. But he is the first man to recognize what the Saxer Stones are.
yeah,
And what the Saxer Stones are is a it's a scattering of megalithic ship anchors. So before the invention of the iron anchor or the steel or lead anchor that you see today, the J-shaped or T-shaped anchor, right? The double J shape, or like the nose of a cat, right? You see like this.
If you look at that carefully, the anchor, especially my dad was in the Navy in England, but if you look at that, the American anchor, it's actually a reptile. It's not an anchor, it's got a head and it's got a serpent tail. Check it out. That's very symbolic. And that
Wow.
anchor, 3 points comes from Poseidon. That, we are talking like that whole amphibious reptile worship is all the way through the military. It's insane. So take a deep look at that anchor. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always looked at the anchor as like it's the arrow too.
Yeah, the
Anchors
arrow.
are arrows. They've often got that. Whatever. And then
It goes back to Pisces as well, right? Pisces, the fish. That's also the Jesus
Pisces,
time. So, yeah.
Poseidon, and Jupiter coming together in Pisces for sure is where you get seafaring. Sagittarius having to do with travel in general, which would include seafaring. That's why the arrow, the anchor, and Sagittarius is where you get the word agitated.
Yeah.
Arrows where you get arrogant.
Yeah, that's cool.
Or arid, like hot, and the Aries too. But also to prove the point about the arrow and the anchor, the ship's wheel, is the bullseye.
Ah, right, cool.
The sniper scope.
Yeah.
So it's the arrow and the bullseye are also Sagittarius. They're symbols of travel.
Sorry, I took you off track with the Saxer Stone thing. You were talking about
that's okay.
These are giant anchors that have been scattered around Florida.
Right.
Showing up. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone who's into Noah's Ark, some of the greatest evidence for Noah's Ark is the fact that there's giant stone ship anchors on the mountains of Ararat, right where the Bible says Noah's Ark is said to have landed. And you don't have to be a Christian or Muslim or Jew to accept that someone landed in a boat or a fleet of boats, ships in the mountains of Ararat, and from there largely rekindled civilization and high society. And that's where you get, your Caucasian race, right? Do I think they come from the Caucasus Mountains? No, but they might have landed near there, near the Black Sea, near border between Europe and Asia, things like that. But someone landed there, and we know that they're still looking for the ship. There's a lot of debate. Shout out to Ron Wyatt, but they know for a fact that there's anchors. So there's a shit ton of anchors. They're called drogue stones. Drogue stones. There's static anchors, which sit still. There's drogue stones. There's ballast stones. And all these are found in Florida. Different uses, but hole with a rock with a hole punched through it is the general Saxer stone that you'll see us talking about on the YouTube channel. And they have rope grooves on them, so we can prove there's evidence. Evidence needs to be evident, or else it's not evidence. Right. If evidence is, it's a $1 million study that you couldn't get eyes or ears or hands on, it's not evidence.
Yeah.
Right. That might be proof, but evidence is evidence. So there's evident rope grooves on all of these anchors.
It's funny because I've been to Florida about 9 times as a kid. It was our regular, holiday. And I've got pictures. I've got old photographs of me stood around them stones. It seemed to be like a signature design of Florida that I recognized.
Wow.
So when I saw that video, I was like, shit. I remember like putting my hand in them holes.
Wow. That's what she said.
So who are the Phoenicians then? And how does that connect to this?
Right. Well, the Phoenicians are, in my eyes, the intermediaries between the Atlanteans and the modern seafaring peoples of the Mediterranean, or not modern, but modern history. As far as we look back, the oldest group of people doing a lot of sailing and dominating the oceans, the Mediterranean Sea, was the Phoenicians, and before that it would have been, those mystery sea people. I mean, think about that. Imagine being a historian. You get paid money to be a historian, and they ask you to come up, identify this group of people. And the best you can come up with is sea people.
Yeah.
That's what they still remember these people as, the sea people. So that's a big question mark. And the Atlanteans were seafaring, naval. The Phoenicians were seafaring, naval. That's largely how we remember them. And it connects to Finland, which, as you mentioned earlier, is the tie between Finland and Florida and Atlantis is the Phoenician language. The original phonetic alphabet, which English is the modern iteration of.
Now,
English,
apparently,
the anglers, the seafarers, the fishers.
Yeah, and this is funny that apparently dolphins are related to the ancestors of Atlantis somehow. And you've got the Miami Dolphins, you've got the Elfins, the Phoenicians, all this Finn. It's very, very cool how you picked it all together. Just want to ask, where did they get the dye from? Because they always wore purple, like it was a royalty, right? Yeah. And they got the dye from the horseshoe crabs, apparently, right? How does this dye relate to modern monarchy, especially in England with the Queen? She wears purple now, right? Oh, she did.
Yeah,
it's still there.
That's a great rabbit hole. Great question. You've got the Phoenicians are famous for their dye. The Tyrian purple, or the Tyrian red, the royal blue, everything between. I mean, it's really, people act like it's one color, but it's really everything between red and blue. Royal purple, of course, is the synthesis of red and blue, but the royal purple, this specific hue, right, this Tyrian purple or Tyrian dye, came from, I think, what do they call it? Not Purex. Shit. I'm blanking on the name, but it's Murex. Murex.
Murex?
Murex, I think, with an M. Murex shell, I think. Could be wrong on that, but it's a certain type of shellfish,
Yeah.
right? It's a shellfish. And what it is, oh, and over there in the Atlantic, they actually say that it's borderline extinct.
Yeah.
So some of the original dyes are lost forever because they can't find that crab or shell there anymore. It's not a crab, but it's it's I don't know if they're considered crustaceans. I did go to college for marine biology, but I was also pretty stoned the whole time and selling a lot of pot. So the Murex shell, we don't have that specific one in Florida, but we have very, very close equivalents. We also have a ton of indigo in Florida.
Yeah.
Think about the word indigenous
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
indigo with God. Indigo, right?
Nice.
And the dyes, like you said, the horseshoe crab, that's a theory. So
Yeah.
you're not gonna find any research papers on that one. But that's me piecing the pieces together with, well, horseshoe crabs are being studied because they're considered immortal. Like they kind of like these other things like crocodiles and alligators too, also in Florida. They don't die. They don't decay and age the way that other things do. They are
Interesting.
either killed or they starve to death because they can't keep up with their exceptional size.
Yeah.
And there's the capped size. There's no cap size to alligators or crocodiles. It's just they get around 20 feet and then they just literally can't eat enough to stay alive.
Wow.
And they starve or run into some other problem. But they don't age. And horseshoe crabs are kind of like that too. They're immune to a ton of diseases. They don't really get cancer. They don't really get all these issues, and their blood has all these special qualities. It's one of the most valuable fluids on Earth, and it happens to be like perfect, like bright blue, like this pearlescent, deep,
Wow.
kind of royal blue, misty mountain Gatorade, Baja Blast.
Oh shit! Yeah. That's cool.
World of Warcraft, Mountain Dew, blue, whatever. I don't know. Code blue, Mountain, but whatever. It's very, very blue syrup.
Yeah.
From their blood, and we also have some pretty interesting shells and shellfish around here that are capable of producing dyes. All the indigo, but then another big one. Shout out to Gary Daniels and Douglas Peck and some other people I'm blanking on, but South Georgia, just over the border, South Georgia has a shit ton of blue clay. This very rare blue clay that can in certain cases comes out like sky blue. Now you can, instead of being like a watery pigment where you need 1,000 berries for one little drop of dye, this is like super abundant and very uber accessible. Like you can just grab it and then boom, you can paint your whole body blue rather than the berry dyes or the shell. That's like a very drawn out process, right? Your indigo processing, you're talking about like weeks, if not months, and just for a single batch. This blue mud, this blue clay, sorry, I'm saying mud, it's blue clay in Georgia. Clay is usually orange and iron rich. This is blue clay, which is interesting. And this blue clay seems to have been crucial to Aztec and Maya rituals and their pantheon of gods, similar to the Hindu pantheon, had a lot to do with blue skin and purple skin and black skin, and these different gods having different skin colors. And you've seen, I'm sure, Apocalypto. You ever seen the movie?
Yeah, of course.
When they're getting apocalyptoed in the ball courts with the atlatls and they're shooting, bows at them. Oh, well, even before that, when they're getting sacrificed, just leading up to that, they paint them blue.
Very
They
interesting.
they,
And
they do blue body paint, and that's found in greater quantities in South Georgia than it is in Mexico, to my knowledge. Or
now,
wherever
just to
that.
quickly mention, in Egypt they had Egyptian blue, which was a dye that this guy Jeffrey Drum on the Land of Chem, he talks about how they were processing chemical compounds to formulate powder, and the blue one was put in the tombs, and it was like royalty. And also they would
Right.
make makeup out of this chemical compound. So he
Little bit of that Zyklon blue stuck to the walls.
Yeah, right. And then you've got the blue bloods, right? That's where we get all this blue bloods from. So very interesting that. Now you claim that the Gulf of Mexico is the true Fertile Crescent, and I thought that was really, really cool. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
Totally. So the Fertile Crescent, they tell us it's in the Middle East. Well, Fertile Crescent, the landmass in the Middle East, it's not an identifiable landmass geographically. You can't distinctly tell it, from a glance, like from a bird's eye view. It's not crescent shaped. It's not fertile, far from it. And the region extending from South Iraq to West Israel and Lebanon and that whole area, and Jordan, and is some of the most desolate wasteland known to man. A lot of that area. It's orange, dry, arid. It's been like that as long as human memory looks back. And to think that's the hospitable, subtropical paradise described in the Garden of Eden, it's pretty laughable. And biblical history or geography were never really given an answer on where Noah took off from. We all know where Noah landed, but where was the early parts of Genesis occurring? Most people have just kind of shook their head and said, oh, well, the flood must have reshaped everything, so it doesn't matter where they departed from. Well, I think it does matter. I think we can discern, right from wrong, and there's a right answer to be had, so we should be looking. But the Fertile Crescent, Middle East, not fertile, not crescent shaped. Okay, well, Fertile Crescent is kind of like a recent term, isn't it? Does it even matter where the Fertile Crescent is? Isn't that just like a very recent way of looking at a Middle East history? Well, Fertile Crescent is a bit redundant, those two words, because they both are emblems and concepts pertaining to Venus, planet Venus. The crescent moon, yes, it's the moon, but the full moon's also the moon. Venus is often viewed as a crescent through a telescope. So the crescent is fertility. Full moon is motherhood. After the act, after the birth, and fertility is Venus. That's beauty and seduction and romance and marriage. Venus. So Fertile Crescent, this has to do with Taurus too, second sign of the zodiac, and which is Taurus rules fertility and it rules the crescent moon. So yes, Fertile Crescent may be a recent term, but the concept is timeless and ancient, and it is the garden of all gardens. It is the most fertile place of all places. It is the most lush and life-sustaining conditions that man has ever known. So it's identified with the sign of Taurus, which rules humidity and everything you'd want for gardening. And this easy, harmonious existence would have definitely seen governorship from the sign of Taurus. And that's what Fertile Crescent means. It's esoteric meaning, but I don't, some guy came up with the term Fertile Crescent not too long ago. But the real Fertile Crescent is the Gulf of Mexico. And I say true because even if it's not the historical Fertile Crescent, it is the true Fertile Crescent. It is truly crescent shaped. It is truly the world's most fertile, identifiable landmass. Any child can look at a map and point to the crescent.
Yeah.
The
And where would
tip
be
of Florida to the tip of Yucatan.
where would be the Pillars of Hercules then?
Right. That's a little bit of an out there theory that I've put forth, but
I like it.
yeah, you know, the Pillars of Hercules in Morocco or the North Africa and little part of Spain or Portugal poking down there, the little tip, those aren't very identifiable geographically. Now, if you're on the ground there, they've said that there's a mountain peak on either side, that if you're in the right spot, it can look like there's a mountain peak on either side of the Straits of Gibraltar, maybe, but I don't know. Maybe the mountains on either side of the Straits of Gibraltar are the Pillars of Hercules. But to me, when I look at a map of the Gulf of Mexico, I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about a pillar. A pillar is phallic. The word pillar goes back to the same root as the word phallic.
Yeah.
And, pilar, it's very phallic. Well, Florida is as phallic as it gets. It is pillar shaped. It is
Yeah.
long. It's a long peninsula. You could hold it like a handle. You could hold the Yucatan like a handle, right?
Peninsula, penis.
Exactly. Peninsula, penis. It's
Yeah,
the cock of
phallic.
America. And it's the tip of Florida, the tip of the Yucatan. That's that golden crescent. I've got a new video coming out. I'm working on it right now. It's the Knights of the Golden Circle, the
Wow.
secret society behind the Confederacy, who wanted not only to secede from the North, but they wanted to take over Mexico and the whole Caribbean, and literally re-piece together the Golden Circle, which
Wow.
they were calling it a circle, but it's this Fertile Crescent from the tip of Florida to the tip of the Yucatan. That would have been their Golden Circle, and much of the Caribbean too. So,
Okay, then who are the Creeks? Because I'd never heard of these either. I've heard of the Greeks, but then you did a really
right.
good video on the Creeks. I mean, I'm like, just banger after banger.
So, and also the Garden of Eden, I should say the Garden of Eden's in the Fertile Crescent. The Garden of Eden
That's
had
right.
4 rivers. The world's
Yeah.
only 4-headed river system, equal 4-headed river system, like your
Yeah.
hand and your forearm and your elbow. Fingertips at the top, elbow at the bottom, your 4 fingers stuck out like that is exactly how the world's only 4-headed river system looks in Apalachicola area of Florida, between the Florida and Georgia state line, is the world's only 4-headed river system. It's in a lush subtropical paradise. It's one of the few places in the world where you could live without fire and clothing. And that is right there in the Gulf of Mexico. Right next to it is the highest concentration of freshwater springs in the world, the largest, deepest, and highest magnitude freshwater spring in the world.
Yeah.
And heck of a lot of other cool stuff. I think I made my point. And then you're asking about the Creek and the Greek. Well, the Creek is another kind of composite Indian group, like the Seminole. The Seminole are very proud of who they are, but there's a lot of different pieces from all over the place that went into it. And they'll even tell you that themselves. But I love the Seminole Indians. Shout out to them. But the Creek have somewhat of a similar story. The Creek is not really like an ancient tribe going by that name. They're a collection of peoples who kind of got forced into or relabeled as Creek. Creek, they were called that allegedly because Europeans were encountering them living along creeks. Now, I've really challenged that on my YouTube channel. I think God works in mysterious ways, and either Creek is Greek or Creek came full circle around to meaning Greek. as God wanted the chips, the cards to fall that way. And basically, C, G, K are largely interchangeable in many languages, especially Hebrew and ancient Greek. And K and G, another instance, is in the Old Testament. Gopher wood is a transliteration from Hebrew to English, and that's Kopher to gopher, and K and G being interchangeable. So in the same sense, Creek and Greek are Kabbalistically the same word. And ancient Greek language, traces of ancient Greek language can be found in the southeastern United States. The Native Americans, the Indians of the southeast United States were speaking somewhat of an ancient Greek language. Now, whether that was passed before Greek was even its own thing, and whether that's Phoenician, and the Phoenician contributions to Greek were also contributed to the southeastern United States, who knows? But mainstream academia doesn't touch this with a 10-foot stick. They don't like anything pre-Columbian that isn't Viking or Wewa's Empire or something like that. But the Greek and Creek is one of my favorite rabbit holes, because the Seminoles, I compare them a lot to Semitic people. Semitic, Seminole, same prefix, different suffixes. Yeah. Seminole, Semitic. Not only do I compare them to the Greeks a lot, or the Semitic people a lot, sartorially, the way they dress in like fustanelli, like the same Greek, like a vest, a white blouse, a skirt, some funky socks or something like that. The Seminoles are largely barefoot. Exactly. Well, they have the same patron saint.
Yeah, I remember you did a little mention on that.
That's big. Love that rabbit hole. The Scottish Greek history of Florida. There was a big Greek and Ottoman, Turkish, Greek, Minorcan, Mediterranean colony out here in New Smyrna, Florida. Smyrna is an ancient Greek city. It was peopled and settled by all these Greek, Minorcan, Mediterranean settlers, farmers, laborers, fishermen, but it was overseen and administered by Scottish overseers. So Scottish, Greek, very unique, interconnected history, same patron saint, love for pipes, love for the bouzouki type instrument, and skirts and blouses and things like that too. And crypto Judaism, another big link there. And the Seminoles are, in my view, somewhat of crypto Judaic, whether that's even if they're not conscious of it at all, which I think, judging from some of their comments on my YouTube channels, they're really conscious of that. And I hope to gain access to their inner traditions and legends and things. If they'll ever share that with me, I'd love to receive that. But from the outside looking in, there seems to be a heck of a lot of ancient Semitic Israelite links, sartorially, pileously, having to do with clothes and hair, and religion, culture. They did menstrual isolation. They have similar holidays. They have circumcision wasn't, well, I don't know about the Seminoles specifically, but I know for sure it was being done in Florida, because we have records of that way before Europeans even arrived. They were doing circumcision. The Coral Castle has a lot of Jewish components worked into it, like Stars of David and a mikveh, which is like a ritual immersion well. It's where we get the word stairwell.
Oh,
What's
cool.
the difference between a stair So down at the bottom of the stairwell is water. That's called a mikveh. It's where the Jews, Orthodox Jews and different sects will wash in before ceremonies or after ceremonies, or before sex or after sex. Weird stuff with the mikveh. But there's one at the Coral Castle. Very cool. And yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
How are we doing for time? Because you said 2 hours, but I'd love to keep for a bit longer if you can. Just got a
Yeah, I
few more
got,
questions.
6 more minutes, then I gotta go grab dinner. But I'd love to
Ah,
chat. We'll do it again
oh,
soon. We'll do
yeah,
it
that'd
again
be
soon.
great. Now, okay, who do you believe really controls the world? And because you did something about the barbecue, the origins of the barbecue and cannibalism. Do you
Yeah,
think that the people who run the world are cannibals and that we are ultimately their cattle?
that's some good. Who ultimately runs the world? You do. I
Thank you.
do.
Yes.
It sounds like pretentious or cliche or like very M. Night Shyamalan, but it's the truth. You do. There's not some big scary Illuminati that's controlling your life with a joystick and you have no say and all this. This is not my message to you. This is just my message to everyone, out there listening. But for the sake of conversation, I say you a lot, I guess. But you don't need it to worry about this big bad Illuminati out there that's
Yeah.
in your dark closet under your bed. You think you see him when you turn on Alex Jones. He's describing it so well, and you think you got a clear picture, and then you go meet some of these people, and they're human too, and they've
Right.
got families, and they've got, they don't know shit about shit. Is usually what I find out when you meet some of these like inner
Yeah.
high up people, is they're way more oblivious than you think, way less
Have you
put together than you think. I kind of say this all the time, but I was a valet on Palm Beach Island. I've parked a lot of these guys' cars.
all
I've
right.
heard a lot of, I've heard a lot of their arguments. I've heard a lot of their phone calls. I've seen
Have
how
you
much they
have you felt attacked or sabotaged by like one of these Masons or secret societies? Have you ever got into an online debate and felt like, hang on, I've been stitched up by their questioning or
right. Your mic is a little bit distorted now.
Yeah,
Sounds
yeah,
like
it's
you
weird. It
maybe
usually
got
does it.
too close or something.
This is what is it hello?
Just a little crackly. I don't know. Just a little
Okay,
crackly.
you sound fine. It does this sometimes. I don't know why.
Okay. Sorry. Well, basically, I want to give you the answer that you were looking for too, though. The Pharisees and the Sadducees,
Yeah,
the money changers and the meat markets. It's the carnivists, the carnival, cannibals. You asked about cannibalism. All meat eating is cannibalism.
yeah,
Carnivorism. Carne and cane is the same root. So carnival, carnival, is the cannibal, the feast of flesh. And basically, it's the money changers and the meat market, the meat dealers, the death dealers, the adrenochrome salesmen. The meat diet is the adrenochrome diet. So yes, I think, it's like morality 101. It's common sense to just be downright disgusted and opposed to cannibalism. Almost every species in the animal kingdom is opposed to cannibalism. Not all. You got sharks and snakes, and some animals will eat each other. Don't get me wrong. But it's baseline morality is, at the very least, an evil person loves their family. At the very least, a bad dog still won't eat a dog, right? So it's kind of like baseline bankrupt bottom, bottom of the barrel is cannibalism. So if that's the only thing that people can muster up the right and wrong inside their hearts to discern from and say, oh, I don't condone that. Well, that doesn't really set us apart from any, normie or any any beast for that matter, right? So I think we need to take it a step further than just condoning cannibalism. Blood adrenalizes all the same. So yes, cannibalism should be especially condemned, but ultimately all consumption of flesh with blood and dead corpses is going to bring about the same effect. Maybe the lesser degree, maybe less evil, less mental illness. Like you get that kuru, you get that brain disease when you eat your own species, mad cow, mad human. Hillary Clinton has it. Kamala Harris has it. But basically, the mad cow disease is definitely worse when you're eating your own species. But man, red meat is right up there too. Pork is as bad as it gets. That's why Jews don't eat pork. That's why a lot of people don't eat pork. It's irredeemable. And blood diet, people don't understand. We all got to read our Bibles a little bit better. We all need to get a big boy Bible and read. A lot of these new carnivore Bibles have been written by carnivorous pedophiles who intentionally mistranslate the good original word of God. When in the King James Version, you see the word shambles. Today, in a lot of these Americanized garbage Bibles like NIV and all these different versions, and all this stuff is watered down or PG rated, or it's like I said, carnivorist, or it's pederast, minded. But basically, Jesus spoke out mainly against two groups of people and two acts, two lifestyles that he condemned beyond anything else. Money changing, of course, and animal sacrifice, blood sacrifice, and blood eating. The animal sacrifice was conducted in the meat markets, the temple. They had a door where the sheep would come in or the lambs would come in and get sacrificed. It was like a conveyor belt of blood running down the streets, trickling down the stones. This was religion back then. People think we live in an evil world today, and this still goes on today, don't get me wrong. But that was paraded as good back then. So we've come a long way. Jesus has cleared a lot of things up. But his two battles that he warred with, they were really the same battle because it was the same group. Two faces of a coin. But basically, this was the Sadducees and the Pharisees. You had animal sacrificers and money changers, and they were the same people. They did their deeds at the same spot. And the word shambles is used in the King James Version, the real good Bible in the English language. The word shambles is used, and it means a money changer's table, or a money changer's stool, or a money changer's, kiosk, where you'd go and get ripped off, right? You'd go and get your coins trimmed. You'd go and get you'd go get insured by the mafia. You know what I mean? Like, this was the archetypical corrupt financial institution, boiled down into shepherd's terms, into a universally understood common denominator terminology. Not everyone knows what a hedge fund is, right? So the Bible can't say hedge fund, Ponzi scheme, because it's written for the shepherd and for the fisherman. So it needs to be common denominator, easy, universal vocabulary, right? Terms and concepts that were easy. So this proverbial shambles or money changer's stool may represent greater institutions, is what I'm trying to say. But for the sake of storytelling, the shambles is the money changer's seat, his table, where he does his ripping off, his debt, conjuring these black magic doctrines. And then over time, or at the same time, or always, but originally it was money changers, seat or temple. Then it started to take on the meaning of meat market,
Yeah.
place of slaughter, or the place where flesh was sold to the common people by the higher ups, by the priestly caste. They would sacrifice animals and then sell it to the poor people to eat. And the Greeks had a history of doing that too. So it's not just like, we're not just Jew hating here or anything. This was, I'm condemning blood sacrifice across the board. Jesus did too. He said, you cannot sacrifice your way out of sin. If you sinned, that is on you. That is your debt that you will have to account for when the day comes. And no amount of blood sacrifice can delay that. No amount of blood sacrifice can, erase that. So that was his number one doctrine. He also went after the Sabbath and saying, the grand message was, you can't just check boxes and say, oh, I'm a good person now. I'm living a bad life, but I washed my hands before I ate. I practiced the Sabbath and I did my blood sacrifice. I'm a good person. I'm clean. I'm absolved. Jesus opposed that. Those are the same people that are ruling the world today, and that's the same belief system that's ruling the world today. Oh, I had just scammed my siblings out of my parents' inheritance, but I'm going to donate some of it to charity. So I'm a great person, right? I just hit someone with my car and didn't report it, but I fostered someone through college, so I'm a good person. You know what I mean? Or and those very same archaic attitudes are being practiced by religions like animal sacrifice and the different methods of removing sin and things like this are all backwards. And those are the people who are ruling the world today. Money changers and blood peddlers.
Okay, I got one more question before you go and eat your dinner. And hello to your lovely girlfriend. I was here in the videos, and your cats. I've got 2 cats. Now you're in the epicenter of the Garden of Eden, in pretty much what could be considered one of the most dense reptile areas, right? You've got lots of crocodiles. Have you got any weird gator stories you can finish this conversation off with? Any personal experience worth mentioning? And what's your opinion on the shape-shifting reptile theory? Because when I look at these videos of gators, sometimes they do look very humanish.
Right, it's a good question. These are all good new questions. Very very glad to be here. Good interview.
Thank you very much.
Entertaining, for real. When I grew up, I had a crazy friend who was an Aries, right? Reckless.
Yeah.
He was crazy. No regard for limb or life. Like we all used to ride motorcycles when we were young. We all used to, fuck around and get chased by the cops and get danger close to an alligator here and there. But this one kid was a little bit above and beyond. He was a little extra crazy. I'd always sleep over at his house. He lived out on the very edge. He was like growing up in 2000. I was born 1996, but when I'd go to this kid's house, it was like 2007, 2008. That was like the final frontier. That was like the front lines, the frontier of like Florida developments, and it still is today. You go out west. So I'm from Boca Raton, Florida. You go out way west Boca, you hit the Everglades, or you hit a preserve that's essentially the Everglades. You've got like $1 million houses with a gated community, and then a Mercedes in the driving way, and it's like cookie cutter house, like 100 Range Rovers or Mercedes on the same block, and it's very well developed. And then you go in the backyard, you go past the swimming pool, and then boom, you're in the Everglades. Like that, it is alligator every single day. So my friend His name was Danny. I can say that. He lived right on the edge of the Everglades.
Wow.
And right on the border between this like ritzy gated community and the heart of the Everglades. And he would, like I said, always have to deal with these alligators. So he was crazy to begin with. He was hyper and, you know, rambunctious, but then he also had snakes and alligators and all this shit turning up in his backyard, more so than the average Floridian. Like, you know, we all have had to get a snake out of the garage and had to get a big lizard out of the garage and stuff like that. But he would routinely have to wrestle alligators out of his pool. They'd come in, and for whatever reason, they'd like to swim in the pool, even though they had the whole lake behind his house, canal behind his house to swim in all day. They would come in and jump in his pool sometimes. And his family, his mom I'd sleep over at his house sometimes. His mom would say, they were Venezuelan, Danny, you know, there's an alligator in the pool. And he'd get up, and it was like, you know, just another normal everyday thing. He would go and wrestle Steve Irwin style an alligator out of his backyard. And he was like 12 years old. These were like 5-foot alligators, you know, as tall as we were back then. And he would grab gators, pull them out of his swimming pool. And that's a little bit beyond, like, we've all encountered gators. You've seen pictures of people or videos of people trapping them in garbage cans and stuff like that. But Steve Irwin alligators like that. Another crazy story with him was one time we would take a little boat across this canal from his backyard. And he did it a lot of times, but I was there for one instance where big alligators were in this canal, and we're in this tiny little boat. We had crossed into this undeveloped area of the Everglades where there was one road, and once you crossed that road, you had to cross a canal, then you hit dry land, and that road was the only dry land that you could see for miles, and it was just sawgrass. It was just like a river, essentially, Everglades, and it was teeming with alligators. I mean,
Wow.
teeming. And we would, like 12 years old, get in this tiny little boat, one step up from a canoe, and cross this canal. And
Wow.
sometimes we would taunt these alligators, and it was, you know, chuck fireworks. We were some rascals back then. We were watching like Jackass and American Pie all day long. And shit.
Yeah.
And all, you know, I'm a nice little goody two shoes vegetarian now, but back then I was a rascal, and we would throw fireworks at alligators and shit. And
Wow.
one time, my friend, big gator, comes up to the side of the boat, opens his mouth. My buddy chucked a firework down and
Oh my God.
and down into the gator's mouth. And yeah, pretty crazy. So
That's insane.
that's a crazy gator story, I guess.
So yeah, the shape-shifting reptile thing, you think it's possible?
Okay, yeah. Well, reptilians, it's hard to say, man. You know, hey, I'll look you right in the eye. I've never seen one. I haven't seen one, you know. Have you seen one?
Well,
it's easy to believe,
but just want to wrap this up. It's been an amazing interview, and I definitely want to do it again. I want to talk to you next time about the claw. You know, you always see these pictures of people's hands in a claw shape. I can go into that in much detail, but I remember, I think it was from, well,
I was just gonna say, my position is that reptiles and alligators and crocodiles are dragons.
yes, they are.
Dragons are nothing but alligators and crocodiles.
Yeah.
When people think of the Welsh dragon, that's a griffin.
A griffin.
It's a griffin or a cockatrice or a more rooster, phoenix based animal,
Yeah.
composite creature. The dragons drag on the ground. They're more serpentine. Dragon and serpent are synonymous in a lot of languages. And the alligator is literally like the serpent that is just a step away from becoming a snake. Those tiny little legs, get taken away. Like it says, they're forced to slither on their belly like a serpent, like a worm, like it says in Genesis. But whatever, the dragon, the serpent, they bellow, so they blow fire. They can create steam. They have steaming breath, and they bellow. All this stuff. But
So
dragons, crocodiles, and the shapeshifters. My whole thing is, could it be real? Could there be shapeshifters? Absolutely. But I also think I hate to boil it down to this, but it's allegorical, it's metaphorical, representative. There are shapeshifting people on this earth today.
Yeah.
Who give every indicator of being human, but are not human, not spiritually, and perhaps not genetically. So that's my baseline. I'll rest my reputation on that definition, but I'll also keep doing research.
I think it was from your video where you mentioned the 4 rivers, and apparently you can see like a logo that looks like Poseidon inside of Florida.
Right.
And if you think about rivers and all these underground tunnels and catacombs all around the world, they're all connected. They would have been the perfect channel for alligators or an amphibious species that were shapeshifting that could go from underground to land. And you don't forget, reptiles, they need heat. And as the world's getting hotter and hotter, maybe there's more of these reptilians living on the planet. Anyway, I want to wrap it up right there. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time and finally getting hold of you. Absolute legend. Check out your channel, All World Florida. Brilliant content. I hope to see you again, Dr. Narco Longo. Thank you very much for your time and all of your knowledge. Keep in touch, my friend. Have a good dinner.
Thanks, Ninjam. You have a good night, man.
Appreciate
it.
Brother. You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. Thanks for listening. Yeah.